Hi, and welcome to this Office 365 support webcast. My name is Josh Topal, and I work on the Office 365 team. And the Office 365 support webcast series is a program designed to help relieve support issues and encourage technical readiness. So today we're really excited to have Thomas Wicker lead our call. And this call will go over and explain OnRamp for Office 365. So today's session provides a really great opportunity to hear directly from a Microsoft employee and learn about some of the new features and releases for Office 365. So today's webcast will be about an hour, and we're going to leave a few minutes at the end to field any questions from anyone on the call. You can type your questions into the link chat box during today's presentation, but I do recommend you save those till the end when we do have our Q&A. So we are recording today's session, and we're going to have the slideshow and the video available online on the original Ignite blog post, which you could find right here. I just pasted that into the chat window. And one last thing is that since we are recording today's session, please understand that you may be captured during today's recording. So if you don't wish to be captured or recorded, please do not type in the IM window, or feel free to leave the meeting and view the recording at a later time. So that's it for me, and Thomas, whenever you're ready, go for it.
Great, thanks, Josh. Hello, my name is Thomas Wicker, as Josh mentioned. I am excited to be doing this support webcast. I'll be presenting on Office 365 OnRamp, and I am a PM in the Customer Connection team and in the Office 365 Engineering org. Josh already kind of did the housekeeping here, so I'll move forward. Just want to cover what we're going to be covering today in this session. We're going to cover how we got here, and what I mean by that is how we arrived on OnRamp for Office 365, and how the second part is how the tool is actually helping the customer with setup into Office 365, and give a little bit of behind the scenes of how it works, and then give examples of benefits, show some of the benefits and examples of those benefits for the customer, support, and the service. And if we have time before the question Q&A, I will go into the road ahead for our tool set. All right, so jumping in here, when we started on the early start of Office 365, or originally was started as MMS, we learned that we needed to help our customers understand. We learned that they needed to understand what they bought, how to use it, and in order to reduce, and we needed to help them in order to reduce support costs and increase customer satisfaction. We started off making a lot of assumptions that customers would be able to handle these things, but we realized very quickly that we couldn't do that. We handled it in the early start. We handled it the best way we could. We put a lot of Microsoft employees on the ground at the customer sites, and we created a better support organization by using the best overall experienced people to handle those support problems. Very quickly, though, we realized that there was going to be a problem with this. We couldn't scale that by just adding people everywhere, and I'm sure you're all very aware of that sitting here on this call. And the second challenge was we realized is the business was pushing faster than the service and process and tools that were out there. That's when BPOS D and BPOS S, I realize I have a typo there, were both really starting to come into full swing. We started trying to take on the problems. We introduced tools to assist in helping the customer with the service. We introduced a tech briefing, a SAW, and an MDD. This stuff was mostly created by the field members that had worked on other deployments, but bigger size deployments. Based on what our team members on the ground, and this was based on what our team members had done on the ground in the earlier phases, and realized that that's what helped the customers understand what they were purchasing and using. It created some scalability, but required humans. And still there was a cost to the customer, and it did not get to support. The information that had been gathered to help the customer align did not get to the support. There were three tools that were formed out of this, or four. There was like I mentioned, the tech briefing, the SAW, and the MDD, which resulted in what we called our SAI and MRI, which came to the OAI-C. I know that's a lot of acronyms, but really what these tools were doing was helping the customer align to how ready they were to come onto the service from a business standpoint, and understanding what they had purchased. There was a second major tool that came out, which was known as DRT, or Deployment Readiness Tool. And this tool actually took from a technical perspective, from an actual hardware perspective, how ready the customer was to consume the service. These were all great tools, but we still had problems. We still could not reach the majority of our customers because these tools still required people to be on site, or it required people with some serious technical acumen to use. And it was still, the focus was coming from a consultant. And so we were set with a real challenge coming out of BPOS-S and BPOS-D when Office 365 rolled out, of how we were going to be able to handle these customers. This pushed us into what we would launch when our Office 365 launch, and it would really push for a convergence of the tools and process that we had been handling with humans. Tools needed to come into the product that had been running by itself, so example OAI and DRT, and the process needed to be simplified for the customers. Tools and process needed to assist support, not just help the customer. And there was a real change in the mindset. Experience needed to remove the need for the consultants. The experience for the customer needed to not need a human from Microsoft sitting, or a consultant from a partner sitting on site to help the customer. Regardless of the size, we realized that the customer's needs were the same, and we needed to address that. We had really realized in the start of Office 365, when we created our portals to help customers, that we made a lot of assumptions. We realized that we assumed, especially in the E SKU, where mostly OnRamp is targeted at, was we had a lot of assumption that customers were IT pro admins, and that is not really what we're finding out that the customers were. So this in turn pushed a lot of effort, pressure on support to handle questions that customers weren't ready to handle, or support didn't necessarily have the background knowledge to handle, and it created for customer frustration, PSAT issues. So we really, with all that knowledge, we really pushed hard to get OnRamp out the door. And OnRamp for Office 365 launched a year ago, trying to bring in some of these tools from that were used as consultants, but also tools that we had created to help specific customers into the product line. So now we're going to talk about how OnRamp helps the customer with setup. Customers can get to it via either the OnRamp's Office 365 Enterprise Admin Setup tab, or they can go directly to it via onramp.office365.com. And I welcome you all to go to that while I'm going through this presentation. And so again, OnRamp was meant to bring what the field had done out with customers, bring it into the product and bring it together. There are some basic requirements that we have for OnRamp to be able to run to help a customer. There are pre-checks that we run in the tool that validate that the customer is running on the correct version of IE in Windows. I'll talk about the road ahead where we're trying to expand that availability. And the best results are provided when OnRamp is run in the environment that is being moved to Office 365. And what I mean by that is that they need to make sure that they're actually running it in the environment, the on-premise environment that is for the cloud. OnRamp is divided into 3 sections. The first section is called Service Selection. The second section is Checks. And there's a feature review. And within those things, through those 3 steps, we provide the customer with readiness steps and a report that they can use to verify their readiness for the service. Service selection is actually a very short set of questions that we ask. They gather a small amount of information based on what you've purchased, either Exchange, SharePoint, Lync, or Pro Plus, and how do you manage users. There's 3 options for AD, for the Active Directory, how you manage your users, and how do you want to migrate mail. There's 3 groupings based on that. And then who you are. We try to verify, help the customer understand, based on what they have found in their environment, what their way they're answering their questions, how skilled are they? It's a very challenging piece to do, but we try to make it as short and simple as we can. On the right, you're seeing an example of what the second step is, where we run, based on that information, we run some environmental checks. These are run on the source environment, and it verifies the readiness of the customer to move to the cloud. In this example here, I've actually run this against Microsoft as if I was going to a full service, and as you can see, Microsoft environment has some challenges. That's part of the point, is that we do have a lot of complexity in our environment, so this report is actually showing a pretty true point, and I'll go into some more details about the report when I go through the examples. The feature review in the report. The feature review takes the customer to specific questions to help them understand what they've selected. Even though we at first only asked 4 general questions to be able to run our checks, we added a whole second section, which is very similar to the OAI-C that we had before, where we ask additional questions to help the customer understand what they've selected. I know this seems a little bit odd that this is in the back part, but really to address the majority of the customers that are consuming Office 365, these second set of questions are more for a complex customer to really understand what they've purchased. The report, which is shown here on the right, gives the customer something so they can actually tangibly work with and work through. Based on also that report information, we are also able to give the customer the correct documentation to address their issues. One of the biggest challenges customers have with Office 365 is there's been a lot of blogs, web TechNet articles, community site documents that give customers what they should possibly do for a problem. However, they're very complex and there are a lot of data in them. So what we've done is we've taken the best addressing article and worked on, and when we have an issue, when we've found an issue based on what we find in the customer's environment, we've taken specifically to that article to help them. I'll talk more about what we're doing for the content here in the near run in the future when we get there. So that kind of gives the quick overview of the OnRamp as a product as a whole. And what I'm going to do is also talk about what the customers actually get. The customer it helps them know what they're getting themselves into. This is the biggest feedback point that we've got early on in Office 365 or POS D and B, POS S, was that customers didn't understand what they had actually purchased. And so once they had purchased it, they were dissatisfied with what they had received. This impacts support directly. I myself personally, coming from support background, know what that feels like when the customer has assumed that they purchased something or they got something, and once they call support, they've realized they're already in a bad state because they've realized they've purchased something they didn't want. And so now we're left at the support level to try to help the customer better that story. And so what also OnRamp does is also give them a guidance on how to plan what they need to do to consume the service. Based on the work that needs to be done to be ready from the checks, and based on the complexity of what they want to do, we give them the correct steps to take action. And this gives them tangible information to work with. It's a report. They can actually have it and decide what to do with it. What does that amount to for support? It gives us an opportunity to have a better educated customer. They've already gone through a story to learn what Microsoft what they have purchased from Microsoft, to understand what their needs are going to need to be. And the customer will have a better understanding of what they've gotten themselves into. So the potential hope is that for support, that they're not coming as frustrated to support when they do have an issue. Customers can consume data with the support incident with a predefined come to the support incident with a predefined set of information and process. This is if they're coming to support with these results, they already have a set of information that helps support understand. It gives a predefined set. Support can know what to expect. Support can also use OnRamp to give customers platforms to work from, and I'll talk about that later in some of the examples. And the reports can be shared with support by the customer. This is a great benefit because this is something that we give a tangible piece of data that we've captured from the customer's environment, and the customer can share that with support. Let's talk about a little bit how it works. When we have those 4 steps, the 3 steps, when we're doing the service selection, what we're actually doing is we're going through a table by what the customer answers, finding out what their needs are. We scope the experience just for those customer needs. So by the customer tailing down of what they're actually trying to go to the cloud with, let's say just mail or mail and SharePoint, we scope down what the experiences they receive in the rest of the OnRamp experience. And the reason we do that is there's no point in having discussions with them or checking for things that they don't even want to move to the cloud. That data is from service selection. Those based on those 4 questions, we provided some questions that subsequent data is provided to the following processes. When we're checking on your readiness, the readiness uses exactly that scoping to only check what needs to be run for them to consume that service in the cloud, instead of checking everything in their environment. This is different from what DRT was. DRT was just simply a large set of checks that ran over the whole environment, regardless of what services you were actually going to consume. And that was actually one of the feedback points. People said it would be great to be able to scope it back to what I need. Now, customers, once they have run these checks once, they can go back and select individual checks to run. The second part of that is by the service selection, scoping down what you need. We're taking to the customers the right steps and right questions so that their documentation is correct to what their needs are. So that's what it's done in the back end. It's a big database table that with a basic matrices of if-then statements that then drive down what the customer needs to do. The benefits and examples for customer support and service. What we're going to try to cover here is give you little examples of what the customer would see as the benefits for the customer, and then some examples. Again, I can't reiterate more. This really, really helps the benefit of helping the customer know what they're getting into. Having the customer understand what they're doing really, really, really helps the support scenario and for their PSAT, their consumer satisfaction, and what their service is. It's really hard for them, once we've given them the story, to be surprised by the work that they need to do during their setup. This has been one of the bigger feedbacks and comebacks to us as a benefit, is that the customers are actually understanding now what they have to do in the service, instead of having to be surprised once they actually try to do, let's say, DirSync or any of those more complex services. They already know this is going to be a challenge. They also know their readiness. There is nothing more disheartening for a customer than to think that they're actually going to move to the service and then find out they have a bunch of roadblocks along the way. By us having these checks ahead of time, we can check their readiness and help them understand how much work has to be done. This gives them also timelines for rolling out their service, so they can discuss it with their business instead of just rolling it out when they're ready to go, or setting a timeline that they then can't meet. This has nipped a lot of customers in their business planning, and it really frustrated them a lot in consuming the service, and we know that they often call support because of that frustration. And really, we're trying to help deliver this so that we help support not have to deal with those types of discussions. They also know, and I'll show this in this example, of the difficulty of what they've chosen. Based on the information we're asking them, the first 4 questions, we can explain to them how complex their deployment that they're wanting to do is going to be. And if it does not meet their expectations, first of all, that gives us an opportunity to set their expectations of their complexity. But if that is not what they would like, they can actually choose. They are given the opportunity to change that expectation. I'm going to jump over really quickly now to the live portal. This is our live in production. This is coming straight to the website from just from the web, not through the admin console. We do require a live ID. Nice. Good that our timeout session's working. And we sign in here now. I will use my Microsoft account, which you can use because it's a live ID. And we can see here I've been here before. So had I not been here for the first time, it would say, do you want to run new? So it's seen me here before. I've said I like Office. I want Office 365. This is that service selection. Say next. And here I've selected everything: Exchange, SharePoint, Link, and Office Pro Plus. as I uncheck, let's go through here and uncheck. Let's go, excuse me, I'm going to quickly do this here. And let's see here. If we notice when we come onto the service here, if I had been running this for the first time, I have it here on the right-hand side is set up easy. And what that means is, so far I haven't said anything. Even if I select all 4 services, I still have an opportunity to have an easy setup. If I click Next, if I choose, really where we find the majority of the complexity comes is if what the customers decide to do with their AD. So this is the second question. The customer has the option to say, we will manage the user counts in Office 365. If you notice, if I add here, we'll synchronize an on-premise Active Directory. We move to a more complex level. And if we use Directory ADFS, Federation Services, or SSO, we move to a full hard complexity. So for this scenario, let's just say we're going to do, we'll synchronize on-premise AD. And then we're still sitting here at a pretty decent complexity, advanced setup. But I'm saying, no, this is a fresh start. We're not going to migrate mail. But I'm going to say, yes, I am going to migrate mail. And even so, that's fine. Even if I choose, let's say I'm below 1,000 seats, it's considered still an advanced setup, but not super complex. But if I add one of these, my complexity will go up. So, and then our fourth question coming up here is, this is where we find out who you are. We created this, and this question tries, and no, it's a pretty complex question. And most people say, well, how do customers know that? The point is, by what they have selected, we're suggesting you should know what these concepts are based on your previous questions that you've asked. And we also give them an opportunity to go back and change this, or go have a technical partner come and help them. But let's just say, for the sake of this discussion, I am an IT professional. And again, this is something that we've realized we really try to put this in is we made an assumption in Office 365 in the eSKU that our customers were really IT admins. And so we're trying to help start addressing that. That's not necessarily every customer is an IT admin. So I'm going to go forward like this. And it's going to ask me whether I want to download our Click Once, or our app, ASPX app. We can go forward with that. And you can see here that it says we have some we will test your environment. We'll also notice that at this point we've already introduced some basic readiness steps the customer can go look at, even without running these checks. Because we do have scenarios where customers don't want to download something to run the checks. I can take you onto this. These readiness steps will help the customer then see what they would need to do. What would they need based on the questions that what they've answered? Here's what they would need to do. And these are the documentation to try to help them to do that. And this takes them specifically to those docs. Again, we also found out with Internet Explorer 10 or greater that there's an enhanced protection mode. There was a soft check that actually ran when we started this to verify what version of IE I'm running, and this is where it actually found that I had this. And if I start running these tests, you can see here, this is based on my previous run. I went back to what I had set. The checks usually take about, well, for Microsoft it takes about 5 minutes, but otherwise it goes usually quick. If you think about Microsoft as a quite large forest and domains to run across. You can see that we actually have some details on what these were. And I'm going to give an example of how this benefits the customer. We go select, let's say, mail. It gives me what the issues were. Granted, these statuses are unknown. And it explains why we couldn't find them. And we also then have learn more, where it then takes you to the specific technical article because we could not find the mail system. That was because I don't have an Exchange admin account here at Microsoft. But otherwise, examples could have been, if I had set here, users and groups. These are only ones that we failed on. Here are the successes. We didn't have any success. Granted, because I don't have a very good count. But it still tried to run these checks across these environments, across the corporate environment. So this is an example. So that gives them the detailed data of what they need to do to figure out the problem and move forward. Again, now I've chosen a very, very, very complex situation in Microsoft. So if a customer didn't have such a complex environment, not as many checks would have been run, or based on what they would scope they're asked to, it would have been smaller, or what they would like to do to consume the service. Then I have the option to just keep going, saying, okay, great, I appreciate you guys telling me I have all these problems. I'm going to move forward. We can't prevent actually customers from moving forward because technically they can try. They'll fail at that point when they can't do it, but we've given them at least the information to understand what's going on. Even at this dashboard, they can still go back and look at the individual categories of what they had issues on. So I'm going to jump back to the presentation and talk about how this helps support. Benefits to support. If a customer has used OnRamp support can now have the customer has predefined or scoped what they're going to try to do, so they come with that data. They have that knowledge of what they want to do. This was a big feedback we did receive from support and customers, is when they were calling support, they didn't even know, when they were in setup, they didn't even know what story they were actually what their story was to come onboarding to the service. And those customers that had run on OnRamp actually had somewhat of an understanding of their story and when I mean story is their plan to come onto the service. So they had somewhat of a story. And there's also a basis of knowledge. The benefit to support is that there's a base of knowledge that can be built on. If you've run OnRamp, then there's a certain set of knowledge that now the customer has. The check results can also be discussed. This has come up numerous times in support discussions. We have thank you emails from some of your teammates in support that have actually said having the customer run these checks and run OnRamp helped us give us a platform to have our discussion. Because often when the issues are open or a customer calls in saying I have a problem with setup, what they believe is the issue is either not the issue or just part of a bigger issue. And by running this full set of checks based on what they want to do, we can see every issue that they're having. And OnRamp also provides a springboard for this discussion on the issues. It gives a support person a set of data they can run with. Often, most support people that have used it have said that they felt it has had customers use it and used it for discussion, has reduced some of their call times by 30 minutes. And I'm just averaging out there. I'm not saying that's a guarantee. So let me just show an example of what we would see in support if a customer handed you a report. Or submitted a report. So here's an example of a OnRamp for Office 365 report. I showed a little bit of a screenshot of this example, but basically here we have this result. This report gives gives you and support a full gamut of results. Exactly here, what they chose, what they selected to do, how they chose to manage their environment, what type of migration they said they wanted to do, and the migration to type. Then, based on the readiness checks, we actually have what they passed and what they failed on. Warnings mean that they could go forward, but it could be a risk. That's an exclamation point. And as you can see, Microsoft has a lot of issues. Part of it helps I didn't have the right credentials. So these are the different pieces, but if you have these pieces, when a customer hands this to you, you can look over this report. So first of all, if I was in a support scenario and I received this report, I could probably tell that we missed a lot of things, that maybe we should be actually there could be a problem with the credentials that they were working in, or they didn't run this in the environment they were trying to migrate from. So it's a great discussion, again, a helpful piece to give to support to actually have this discussion. Also, when you're in support, I lost my place there. If you're having a discussion point with a customer, understanding what complexity they've set up, this is a great discussion point. Also, if they've selected these type of pieces to go to move to the service for their setup, if they've chosen a super advanced setup, using this right nav, right complexity meter, as we call it, is a great discussion point for helping the customer realize what they're accepting to do. Microsoft is actually saying then, when you've made these selections, this is going to be complex. I know that sounds maybe kind of weird because we always try to make things sound easy, but certain things that we offer are complex things to do. And for smaller business or not very high-end businesses or high-skilled set businesses or ones that are run by IT admins, even though it sounds great maybe in our marketing slicks, the actual complexity of trying to do that is going to be a very frustrating situation for the customer. Also, if a customer is not quite satisfied or understanding their complexity, it's a great encouragement to have them go through the give it a moment here. Having the customer go through the feature review. Let's see here. There we go. And as you can see here, the feature review, based on what they have selected, is asking these questions to really know if maybe these customers, if they're coming back with a lot of I'm not sure's, that will actually show up in the report. And then what that really means is the customer doesn't know what they're selecting. We try to make this yes and no as simple as possible, but the I'm not sure needs to be there, and or we're going to handle this is a great way to start putting ramifications around these questions. It's a lot of questions. I'll just make you aware of that. But this is to try to help a customer understand what the complexity they've chosen. Great. Jump back here to the presentation. Benefit to the service. As we collect the results data, we can change the order of actions. In other words, as we collect the data from what these customers are selecting, we can change the order of actions based on what we're finding, and we can change what documentation is provided. This is really key. Is what I mean by that is we can actually change the steps that are supposed to be taken by the customer based on the feedback that data we're collecting, and also change what documentation, the actual pieces of documents. If we realize a document that we've been sending people to is not the right thing to address via the database that I mentioned very early on, that we run the tool set under, we can actually have people go, we can change what document that points to. This is really, really key is if we have something that rolls out as a product, let's say a patch, a service pack or something rolls out, and we realize that we need a temporary documentation in place to help the customers that are using that based on what we're found out with the product, we can actually change that documentation pretty close to on the fly. You know what I mean? That it's about a week for it to get out. We can also see based on the data we're getting that we're making the impact OnRamp is making. The data, the collection of the data used in the collected data used in correlation to the time spent on incidences shows our impact. And really, what we're actually seeing is customers that have run through OnRamp are spending less times on support calls. It's not saying we're completely avoiding the support calls. They're spending less time when they're on the support call because they have a level, like I mentioned earlier, a level set of education. We've also been receiving the impact that's making. We can see the benefits, the feedback from customers and support. Have an example here. I know it's a little bit of an eye chart, but I'll try to go through it a little bit. And this is what this is based on: is customers that have the comparison of customers that have used OnRamp and those that have not. We're working with their support counterparts to collect this data, and we can see per major areas where OnRamp is actually in, where we've made an impact. And any of the bars that go below, this is where customers had spent less time on the call based on the fact that on those incidences they had used OnRamp. So CNAME incorrect or missing, we had less time being spent on those customers that had run on it or not versus not. SRV incorrect or missing, we spent less time. There's also ones where we say, for example, DNS and redelegation, customers are spending more time. So we need to look at maybe in that area what we could be doing better in OnRamp to address that, to bring that incident down. Minutes per incidence. But this is where we can get direct correlation. And really what also helps with that is when we're doing the support, when the support is helping customers, is the taxonomy is set correctly. All right, so we still have some time here, so I'm going to quickly go into the road ahead. And this is really, understand this version of OnRamp that we do have out is our was the first one where we're really trying to pull this into a product. And what we're really working on now in the road ahead, and where is less questions. We've realized that customers more and more do not want to answer questions. They look to us, to Microsoft, to help them decide what they should do best. Microsoft is the experts. So we've worked with support team members, with product team members, and what we're doing is we're actually doing less questions and more running by diagnostics in the customer's environment to find out what they have and then suggest what they should do. The customer at any point can choose to go manually choose what they want to do, kind of to what we currently have today, where we ask a couple of questions and they can say, yes, this is what I want to do. And the next big thing is a lot of what I talked about here in this earlier part was where the customer needs to provide to support when they call in. Yes, I did use OnRamp, and here is the results I had. What we're focusing on here is now getting that data, what we find in the environment and is in our database, getting that to support. And what I mean by that is, so when a customer calls in by an incident, the support team member will be actually able to see ahead before they're calling that customer or working with that customer what they have in their environment, and based on what we have gathered, and where they are in their deployment phase. As the real focus of this is to enable support even more in this next run of the setup experience, the OnRamp experience, so that support people are in a better state. That's actually the full part of my presentation. I'm more than willing to take a lot of questions because I know we have quite a bit of time. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, Thomas. Great presentation. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free, now's the time to type them into the chat box. I'll also be asking a couple survey questions right now, and then we'll take it from there. But thanks so much for the presentation, and thanks everyone for joining. And yeah, feel free again to type those questions in now.
Josh, should I just pull up the IM window, or are you going to read them out, or?
Yeah, if you could pull up the IM window, that'd be great. I'm going to take over the screen real quick, though.
Okay.
Let's see. It's kind of quiet right now, but yeah. And then one question that I had was that is there going to be a copy of the slide deck available? And yes, and that'll be at the Ignite site, which the link is right there, and you can see the video recording later. I guess while we're waiting for some questions to come in, if you do want to get in contact with me or Thomas in the future, you can also send me a private message, which is right there.
Yes. I saw a question from Dale Webster regarding the readiness assessment tool. Dale, I believe you're referring to is that the DRT? I don't know if Daryl's still on. Okay. I see Christian has a question with a checklist for partners who know what they can do with the tools. So we're also working with, to answer your question, yes, we are working with our partner team of Customer Connection that is working on the partner portal. And the new version of OnRamp will actually be we're working on a process where the partners can possibly package this up and send to the customers to gather that information. So to Daryl's question, and this is a very common question, and so it's great. I'm glad you asked it. We'll absolutely implement it. Will we run the full set of checks again like DRT? The DRT, we'll have it scoped where the customers won't, when they're running it here in the setup experience, it'll be scoped to just what they're doing, saying they want to come onto the service, but they'll have an option to go off. DRT is being pulled into an Office 365 version of BPA. All those checks will be in there, and the customer can then run the full gamut of checks, which probably be more than what they need. But to Daryl, to your question, to your point, there are often scenarios, and what I mentioned earlier, where a customer will call in with a support issue, and it's maybe what they think it is not even the right what the issue is, and it's actually more. And so to answer your question directly and indirectly, in the setup experience, the OnRamp setup experience, it'll be scoped to what they're trying to do for setup, but they'll have the option to go full out to a full. It's going to be called BPA, Best Practice Analyzer, for Office 365, and it will have all the DRT checks. Errol, I see your question there. Some of our checks. So you're actually asking about Office like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, or Are you asking more? Okay, yeah, no. We don't have checks for that. Okay, awesome. Okay, I can take that at feature as we do have some diagnostic tools as part of the support scenario. So these same type of checks that we're running, we've also written checks that can be run for specific like end user scenarios. So that'd be case point like I'm having problems connecting my Outlook. It's not connecting. That they can run checks based just for the individual user on their Outlook. How much goes into Word and Excel and PowerPoint? I would have to say I don't think we're going into those. But it's a great ask, and I'll take that feedback back. I'm writing that down right now. Hope that answered your question.
Okay, great. Any last questions? We still have a little bit of time. And I have just one more survey question for everyone. I know this is it. Okay, well, it looks like that there aren't any other questions, but yeah, so thank you, Thomas, so much for your presentation, and thank you everyone for joining and spending time with us. You could look for more support Ignite sessions and Office 365 support webcasts on the Ignite website, which is ignite.office.com and /events, and you can see all of our past presentations there and upcoming ones. But I think that's it. So thank